Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Velvet Lounge Life. And yes, you have a Poldark 100% spoiler review coming at you at any second now. This is season 5, episode 3. As you know, this is the final season. So there are a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts, a lot of microcosms as far as the different storylines go. You will learn a lot more about each character, and some of your questions will definitely be answered. Listen out for why Ross has that scar on his face. That question is finally answered in this episode. So, some of the things that we're going to do are, of course, look at some photos from the series. Actually, it's from the episode. Don't tell anyone. So what we have left from last week, going into this week, we know that Ice is involved. We know that Morwenna gets some cojones, and she basically faces up to evil lady Wentworth. We also know that George takes a sure shot. Okay, you know that George is a horrible shot, but he takes a shot, and there may be some widow making. Also, Ned takes a huge leap forward over a gorge. There's a reason why he does that. He's a daredevil, and that's a problem at his age. Also, yes, of course, there's trouble at the mine. I mean, anytime you're hundreds of feet below ground and things are unsteady and you are in the 1700s in the foothills of Cornwall, in a time where safety was definitely important, but they didn't have the technology, things can always go wrong. So we'll get more into that. Unfortunately, Kitty is still facing abuse from people simply because of the color of her skin, but she actually ends up walking with a devil in this episode, a devil from her past. And as you can see, and as I stated, the family is back at home in Truro. They are happy. They are living life. They're making love. They're going for walks on the beach. They're holding hands. And there will even be some song singing in this one. And unfortunately, some flower bringing as well. Ross receives a letter that Ballantyne, and that's Ballantyne with a B, he sends him a letter just in case he is killed. He basically says, if you receive this letter, I am dead. I'm a goner. And unfortunately, these are the reasons why. This is who you need to basically avoid, which is Ned, because Ned basically has I don't know, a big red X on his chest in a way, and anyone that has anything to do with him is basically in danger. And so that's what Ballantyne's letter is telling Ross. So Ross, unfortunately, is going to break the news to everyone that Ballantyne died in London. He doesn't know actually, they do know that he drowned. They do know that, but he obviously was murdered. George discusses Valentine, that's with a V. He discusses in great detail how, I'm sorry, I'm giggling, but with Elizabeth, he discusses Valentine's studies. And, Elizabeth, of course, responds. And there's, other banter that goes back and forth between the two of them about travel plans and such. And his uncle has had enough, to the point that he has him taken by arm and helps actually to escort him to his bedchamber. Unfortunately, the entire time, poor little Valentine, the child, is sitting there witnessing this entire madness of King George. He's not a king, but you know what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, Drake is being tempted by this evil temptress, Tess. Her name is Tess, and she's the evil housemaid that Demelza hired because basically she was trying to find jobs and help people out because everyone's having such a hard time. This evil vixen thinks that she's going to be the grande dame and take over, and she basically tells Drake, if not you, your brother Sam. Oh, whoa. Hopefully Sam will throw the Bible at her and there will be some really good usage out of that book. Dr. Ennis has become a well-known doctor because of his testimonial and the speech that he gave, as well as him being a witness at, or actually he's basically the specialist type witness at the trial of a dude who tried to kill the King of England and who was given a sentence of being unfortunately combined to an insane asylum for the rest of his life versus being hung by the neck until he was dead. And he also, and Dr. Ennis also receives an offer that would actually take him out of Truro for, like, it's a huge, huge opportunity. So we'll see if at the end of the series, if he takes that or if he stays in Truro, not sure. And then we have Ned confronting his evil nemesis, which is the same nemesis that his wife has. And he basically gets to the point where he's really trying to antagonize the guy. He wants to slap him with a big dirty boot. But Ross kind of talks him back and he lets calmer heads prevail. Then we have Morwenna bringing the sexy back. Look at how she's looking at her husband. That's how I look at my husband on occasion. I mean, after so many years of marriage, it kind of does die down just a little bit. But she is finally getting into her hubby and finally feeling free of the monkey she had on her back of the evil vicar, even though he's dead. And she doesn't see his ghost or anything. It's just the memories of her trauma, having to deal with her evil-ass mother-in-law, having the mother-in-law steal her child away. I mean, back then women had no rights. They had, you know, regardless of your color, regardless of how much money you had, your rights were limited if you were married to a man. So those are her nightmares, but she's finally starting to come out of that, which is really nice. They're realizing that, and these are not the spies. These are not the spies. I'm just giving you a little in between. There are spies that have followed the Poldarks and everyone else you can imagine from London to where they currently are all located. So, you know, that's something that still is around and about. And the reason that I mentioned that is while Ned is confronting his evildoer, and it's also his wife's evildoer, you know, this spy is sitting at a table kind of listening and watching everything that's going on. So here what you see is, Jeffrey, Charles, and Cecily are romping around Truro, and they're doing it pretty openly. They know that if they stay in certain circles and on certain sides or on certain estates, that they're less likely to be discovered, so they can kind of be open and out there. But, you know, they're kind of being a little bit too loose and fancy free, and that is definitely going to come back at them, and we will talk about that in a few minutes. Yes, George, as I said, breaks out a Widowmaker and flashes that shot like a little cannonball came out of there. And the shot that he took was at his uncle. Why did he take a shot at his uncle? Even though his uncle has his hands up, he's like, George, it's me. George, what's going on? What are you doing? I mean, kind of not the smartest uncle just to stand there in front of the dude versus trying to get out of the way, duck, drop, and roll something. But the reason why is because when he sees his uncle, he in his own sick mind is seeing Ross and Elizabeth embracing, telling him, in, obviously this is in his fantasy world, telling him that, oh, you don't belong here. It's always been us, and whatever, all the things that his delusions, or what he thought were delusions, are coming back to haunt him full circle. And now not only is he seeing Elizabeth, he's also seeing Ross. So his mental illness is really taking a toll. So what happens is George's uncle decides to have a conversation with someone. We'll get more into that. But because he fired that shot, and because he was completely losing his mind, he is not only in his room, he's basically locked down, and he has a guard at his door. So supposedly, if he tries to just walk out the door, they're going to stop him. And the good thing and believe me, George does not know he's doing any good, but something good that is happening and this is a conversation his evil uncle is having with Cecily's evil dad, is about the deal they were making to bring slave labor to Truro, or to Cornwall in general. That is completely on hold, because George's uncle knows that his number one priority is trying to get his nephew back into what he would deem a healthy mental state. Now, we have to say to ourselves, we have to say this to each other, we have to ask ourselves, was he ever mentally stable in the first place? Pre-Elizabeth, pre her death? No, he was always a madman. Now the madness has just completely taken him over, because he doesn't have Elizabeth there in life to sort of guide him to where she needed him to be. So that was something that we discussed today, is like, that's a thought. So the Poldark kids, you're going to see them a bit more this season. And I'm saying, like, every episode so far, there has been some interaction with their kids. And I know there's a reason for that, and we will get to that in some future episodes. But the kids, you get a precursor here. There's a conversation that takes place that makes you aware of how these, they're little kids, but they're very intelligent. They're not trying to be grown-ups, but to be kids of this era, they're very intelligent. They know how to read, they know how to write, they know how to do things that kids their age, even in some of the upper echelons, did not know how to do. And the reason why is because Demelza did not have that background. She acquired it after being with Ross and being able to afford it. And she made sure that her kids had it from the earliest age, and they continue to progress. And seeing all of this and having a particular conversation, it gives her an idea that will come up in the future. And that's in this episode, so you will find it out sooner than later. So Cecily has a conversation with her evil ass dad again, and he continues to treat her like crap. And treating her like crap is just basic, and it's not a just, but it's oppressing her. Like, her thoughts have very little value. If I'm just going to say no value to him. Some of the ideas that she has, he considers to be like kind of out there and makes no sense. So he is the typical slave owner, kick a woman in the middle of her spine until she does what you want her to do. Raping people is not beyond him. You're going to hear about that coming up. Treating his wife like garbage, etc. Like, all of those things he considers to be very normal, and why isn't every man doing it? So Demelza proposes this is her talking to Ross, and she proposes that they pay children to learn to read and write. and any other, numerical, mathematical skills, etc. And she knows that payment needs to be made to the parents, because if the kids aren't getting paid to work, her hope is that they can be paid to learn. What a brilliant idea. Ironically, some people don't want their kids to be any better than what they are, or they're jealous because they may become more than what their parents are. The parents are jealous of that. But Ross thinks it's a great idea and something that should be proposed. So also in this conversation, Ross talks about the maid, Tess, and he has lots of reservations about her, and he warns Demelza to be on the lookout. You better not regret this in the future. We all know that there are already regrets that she doesn't know that she will have in the future, because Tess is really scheming and amps up her scheming by the end of this episode. So unfortunately, Kitty continues to endure hatred simply because she exists. It's awful. It's horrible. Dr. Ennis was ready to flip someone's wig to the back, but had to be held back by Kitty. Even Dr. Ennis's wife was like, do this, dude. Like, take care of business. But the smart thing, Kitty has lived through this all of her life, obviously. So she knows that any action will only make things worse at this particular point in time. So the heat is brought down. This is her holding him back. And, they're able to continue on their way to doing their errands, as well as whatever other business they have to do. And for now, things are hopefully okay. Moena, Mama's a child. She so misses her little son. But the good thing is, because, people are working and this and that, and some of the kids are just too tiny to do any type of job, she actually helps a child who is hungry, and she even offers to teach him how to look at a picture book and to read him a story. So that opens up an opportunity in the future. The evil Lady Wentworth has a conversation with Dr. Penrose, who is the doctor from the insane asylum. And she is getting a lesson on, the merits of slavery, basically, and the mentality of slavery and how to deal with slaves, etc. There is an introduction that is made to George's evil uncle. And, they're going to try to come up with a way to get him, quote unquote, cured. But in the meantime, Lady Wentworth is approached by Moena. Moena put the witch slap on her and basically was like, you know what? I put my big girl undies on, or bloomers on today. I am going to approach this woman and ask about my son. So if nothing else will push her, the love of her baby boy does. So she actually asks how he is. She gets a very brief, quick update. She's basically told he is not allowed, we don't talk about you. Basically, you don't exist. I wish that Moena hadn't asked her if her son asked about her, because you knew what she was going to say. It was just not nice. But also, look at how handsome Drake looks in his suit. No, he cleans up well in this episode. So you will see some of that. George's uncle getting that advice from the evil Dr. Penrose. Yeah, that's going to be a treatment. Kitty faces her devil here, who happens to be Cecily's evil father. And he actually raped her when she was 12 years old. And she actually was enslaved by him and his family. But his overseer sold her to Ned. Ned had to plead and bargain and whatever it took to free her. And with the help of her mother and Ned, that is how she became free. Eventually, her and Ned fall in love, and that's how they became man and wife. Then we have a little conflict here because obviously Kitty couldn't approach her evildoer without him having a nerve to have a lot of extra words like he knew so much. Well, let me tell you, Ross took him to university, and it was a good scene. The next thing that happens, unfortunately, is nothing can ever be peaceful, as we can see. So you have conflict on top of conflict on top of conflict. So what happens? There's an explosion at the mine. And so they get the news from Drake. But in the meantime, while in it's George's mine, the Warlegan wine Will Plenty, that where the explosion actually happens. So remember that the explosion takes place at Will Plenty, which is owned by George and his uncle. So they get this news, but in the meantime, George is getting burnt, bled, drowned, blistered, vomited, and leached, and everything else you can imagine that will kill a person. That's what and make him more insane. That is exactly what this Dr. Penrose is doing to George at the request of his uncle to quote unquote cure him. And George is in horrific condition, mentally and physically. He's worse than he was previously. His uncle makes a decision, along with whoever his mine boss is, that guy in the background, not to rescue anyone from Will Plenty. And people are horrified. You are going to let people just be buried alive when you know they can be saved. And because he thinks it will cost more, based upon the information he received, to save them than it would and I think they said it would take 2 weeks to save the people. He doesn't think it's worth the money to do that. So money, once again, it's a Warlegan thing. So in the meantime, while George is being tortured, and all this stuff is going on, Ross, Ned, Drake, Sam, and others plan a rescue, even though it is not Ross's mine. And Demelza, of course, gets scared about that for good reason. But in the meantime, George is getting an ice bath. He's basically being drowned and being brought back up just before his lungs, I guess, completely fill with water. And for whatever reason, they thought that making you super hot or incredibly cold was going to somehow snap you out of your craziness. And unfortunately, Valentine can hear everything that's going on downstairs. And Mowena gets more visitors. So there's some more kids that stop by or are dropped off. And these kids, she not only gives them something to eat, but she also is now sort of becoming a teacher. I'm just going to say it. I'm pretty sure she becomes their teacher. So Ned has this idea to free people from the mine, and he has to jump to the other side of the gorge in order for them to put planks across, because the other side of the gorge are where the people are that need to be saved. If they don't get to the other side, they can't save them. Plus, they have to blast through a wall to connect the two mines together. And what ends up happening, I have to also spoil this too, is that he doesn't quite make the jump. He ends up hanging on the edge of the cliff, and Ross has to do his Superman jump over and pull Ned up to safety, save his life again. And then they're able to put boards and planks across, get equipment, men across, do this dynamiting, and they're able to start pulling people out of the Warlegan mine, and they end up saving everyone that could be saved. And there are some people that did not make it because they were already dead when they got there. That's why there are bodies lined up. And so thankfully, whether it was, pulling the body out so the person could have a proper service, or saving people that were injured, they were able to get out every individual. Dr. Ennis, one of the things I'm going to talk about before I get to this is he does recognize that Ned has a high risk threshold. He doesn't know, no one knows, even Ross questions, Demelza questions, everyone is kind of questioning, why is Ned taking all of these super incredibly high risk? Because he should not have, for one example, besides all the fighting and defending that he's been doing, and also practically, you know, practically dueling with people, whether it be with swords or guns or fists or knives or whatever. You know, one of the things that should have happened is one of the younger guys would have taken that leap, or they would have done something else, versus Ned jumping over that gorge, which actually put himself as well as Ross at risk, because they had a plan and this guy just decided to do something else because he didn't want to wait. So yes, Moena gets more quote unquote students, and George gets more and more strapped down, so he ends up being in a version of a straitjacket, basically, because he's just so out of order. And then once again, Dr. Ennis is like thinking about and having this conversation with Demelza about Ned's recklessness. And Cecily, her evil dad, doesn't know a couple things about her and her mother, who is deceased, unfortunately. He doesn't know that secretly they're basically abolitionists. He's a slaver, and they're abolitionist, which is why she feels the way she feels. And she tells Jeffrey Charles exactly what her beliefs are when it comes to slavery and other things. So it was really kind of enlightening to hear and see that. Then Valentine is able to visit with his half-brothers and sisters. Of course, these kids don't know they're related, but Valentine was being left alone while George was going through all kind of madness in getting these weird treatments. And so he was just wandering about, and his brother Jeffrey Charles brought him over to Ross's house because everyone in the village, of course, is now having a dinner, a drink, a relax, whatever it is, after that horrible mine accident. And there's relief, but there's also sadness. The maid comes in to feed George, but she's never been comfortable around George and his uncle. So she decides to undo one of George's straps and leaves a spoon there so he could feed himself, which was kind of funny. George gets up, he takes a run. He runs really, really, really fast. It's kind of like, this was amazing. Like the shooting of this scene, I was just like, wow, that was really good. But, where is he running out in the world half naked? Yes, back then, this would have been considered half naked for a man especially. But he's out there in his nightgown, running full speed ahead, looking like a mess, over to Ross's house. What is he doing at Ross's house? And Ross's house, remember, it's full of people because of the mine situation. And also Valentine is there. He looks in the window, he sees Valentine, and let's just say he is less than pleased. Dr. Ennis sees him, and he goes out and basically runs after him. George is basically like, I think, thinking in his mind, oh my God, my life is truly over. So he ends up running to the edge of a cliff, and he is a millisecond from jumping off when Dr. Ennis pulls him back and brings him back to Trenwith. His uncle is there. He's mortified because, you know, now Dr. Ennis knows all of his business, which he knew probably like 50% of it. And the guy, and George is like, you know, being taken upstairs, and the maid knows, like everyone knows that something crazy is going on. In the meantime, Ross gives Demelza a bath, chicka chicka bow wow, and they have a conversation about everything that's going on. And some of the other things that happened is Cecily's dad is not pleased because he catches her, sees her, if you will, because he walks in with her. Jeffrey Charles and her walk into Trenwith together, because a bunch of people, Ross, Demelza, Jeffrey, Charles, Cecily, and others, bring Valentine back over to Trenwith because, like I said, he's basically been abandoned since George has been, going a bit insane. Jeffrey Charles actually gets his military training and whatever it is they paid for, because Ross looks at his uncle as like, basically, now, don't tell me you're not going to pay for this boy's training now. I know all of this information right here. Even though you know that Ross is not a gossiper, but his uncle is a lowlife, so of course he's a gossiper, so he's afraid of what might actually happen. We do have Demelza singing again, and I will do a little rendition for you. It is going to be horrible, I warn you. I'd hold a finger to my tongue, I'd hold a finger waiting. So she sings that song. I don't know what the title is. That's why, unfortunately, I had to assault your ears. But Valentine has some, like, a last moment of family time with Ross and Demelza and his brother before they leave, because he's back, unfortunately, over there with his dad, and who knows when he'll see them again. Ross gives a little conversational thing going on, talking about Ned's risk-taking as well. So there's a lot in this episode about Ned taking all these crazy risks. Some of the things coming up next week are the following. Moena sees her child, her child, finally. Something is uncovered. There's a ploy. There's some things amiss. The evil maid Tess becomes a spy for money. But you always knew that she was one of those women for money. Cecily has a proposal, a really in